Hey there, it's Sunday morning and I just released a video on turning my wooden bandsaw into a toy by replacing some of the parts with 3D printed parts, in particular the upper blade guide, which really worked out well. Like I said in the video, if you watched the video, if you haven't, there's a link in the description and there's a link at the end of this video. But yeah, it worked out well, so that encouraged me to take it further. I have to be honest that what I started with, the idea that I started with, was to design an entire 3D printed bandsaw, which I think can be done, okay? It's just to make the parts strong enough, okay, as you're going through. And it would take some trial and error. Now, I made a strategic mistake here by underestimating how strong the table construction was. When I originally designed it, I thought it would be strong enough. And maybe it would have been if those supports that I made, like if I didn't have to cut those, maybe it would have held up better. But since then, I've changed quite a bit about the way I print parts. In particular, like I showed in that video when I printed the insert and the insert frame, what's called the sparse infill was set too thin. All it did, the sparse infill does two things. In reality, most people use it so it only does one thing. And the one thing that it does is it makes it so that it supports the top. Okay, so when you're printing a top on something, it needs something to print onto, and that's what that sparse infill does, right? It provides something to print the top onto. But if you make the walls that make up that sparse infill thicker, then you add a lot of strength to the part, okay? It's not the same amount of strength you'll get by, say, printing it solid, completely solid, but you're gonna add a lot of strength, all right? They're not gonna be just there to hold up the top. They will actually reinforce the part. And also paying attention to the way it's oriented and the structure itself. I changed all of the printing that I do now from any other type to the tri-hexagon infill. That adds straight lines and triangles. A lot of guys say you use the gyroid, and I tried that on the upright. What I didn't like about the gyroid is how much movement the printer is doing as it's forming that shape. And that shape, I don't think that shape actually adds the amount of strength that the tri-hexagon one does, okay? The amount of movement it does wobbling all over the place like that adds wear and tear to the printing, the machine itself. So I said that, better to do straight lines than be wobbling all over the place like that, and save your printer to print another day. So if I did it over again, I would use the things that I learned from that to improve the strength of the design, because I really came to focus on that when the piece of wood jammed down through that insert. It really highlighted how weak that construction was, okay? So it's a learning process whenever you adopt a new method of building something, right? It's like when people first get into woodworking, they don't understand that wood, they might know it, but they don't truly understand that wood has a strength axis, a grain direction. And it's not only that, it expands and contracts more across that grain than it does along it, and you have to make allowances for that. So that's all a learning process as well. I've seen guys using wood in ways that are totally against that strength axis, and it fails, and they're wondering why, and that's the reason. They didn't understand that it has that strength axis, and it's substantially weaker, the other way around. You take a piece of wood and you go with the grain, and it's very strong. You'll bend it, It'd be very difficult to break it, but if you go across the grain, you can snap it with your fingers. So that's a substantial reduction in the amount of strength. And that's what you're up against with this. You have to understand how the, not only how the parts get oriented to maximize the strength, but also the way that they're printed. So increasing the infill or printing parts solid when they need to be is probably the best way to overcome that. Now, in other news, I've been doing some other designs, 3D printing designs. Once again, trying to get really good with using FreeCAD for my own personal uses. The other thing is the weather over the past month has been terrible here. It's been so wet and rainy. I started work in the shed when it was nice, but then it got terrible and too wet. And, you know, I can't say too wet. If I had to do it, I'd go and do it, but I don't have to. So I put it off and I did stuff that I can do sitting in my living room, like design stuff like this. This is a T-bevel. If you are a long-time viewer, you know I made a T-bevel a long time ago, 10, 12 years ago, and that's a video on my main channel. I made that from wood though. This one is 100% 3D printed, even the knob and the screw that goes in there and the blade, and you can see how neat it is. And I actually put my lettering in here, beautiful. And the other one that I designed and printed was this combination square that works just like the real thing and is actually square. Most guys, you know, real woodworkers would call this a toy. You know, you give this to your kid, whatever. But I don't know, you go to Home Depot and places like, you can see plastic rafter squares and stuff like that. They work. I've worked with guys who are using plastic squares and stuff. Sure, they don't last as long, but when you look at it, okay, you buy a metal combination square, even a cheap one, it's like 20 bucks. And if you have a 3D printer and you have the file to print, which I'll be putting both of these on my Patreon and locals as soon as I get the details sorted out, probably within the next month anyway. If you have the file, then you can just print it. And it's just the cost of the plastic, and you don't have to sit there watching it, although it's kind of addictive to do that. And yeah, you can do something else while it's printing. And when it's done, if it breaks, you print another one, right? No big deal. It's not that much plastic. And if you have a reliable file to go by, and your printer is a reliable machine, then you're going to get the same result every time, right? And it works beautifully like this. I love this. I love this color combination, actually, this white with this dark green. So what else is going on? You can see in the corner here, my CNC machine used to be on the wall here. Right? And there used to be a big TV screen beside it that I was using as a monitor and a board with the mini computer on there to run the CNC and all that. That is now in my laundry room in my basement. I moved that down about a week and a half ago. It's not hooked up yet. It's on the wall. I've got it up on the wall, but it's not hooked up and working yet because I don't have anything I need to do with it yet. When I have a job that I need to do with the CNC, I'll hook it up and get it working, and then I'll build an enclosure around it. I haven't decided whether I'm going to film that part of it. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. That's a situation where a lot of guys, you know, they might watch it, but otherwise wouldn't be interested in it. Most people are going to have the CNC mounted traditionally, which is flat, you know, and not give it any thought. They're not going to put it up on the wall. But I have it on the wall. I had it on the wall out here. That was a real revelation because as soon as it went on the wall, I started using it because it was not covered with junk. I mean, a vertical surface doesn't hold any junk. You can use it, okay? Whereas a horizontal surface, like my workbench here, which I just cleaned out because I got my next project involves my workbench. That was loaded with junk up until yesterday afternoon. And the table saw over there, I'm looking at it right now, there's barely an inch of it I can see because it's covered with scraps of wood and tools and stuff that I moved off the workbench. Take it off the workbench, put it on the table saw. From the table saw, I'll find some other surface to lay it on. Right? So the CNC goes on the wall, you use it. If it's sitting there flat, it's collecting dust, it's collecting junk. Okay, so yeah, that's gone. That was like phase one of the shift to the shed. And the move to the shed is going to happen over the course of the summer. It starts with building the saw. I want to have the saw completely done before I take the rest of the stuff out of here. And the rest of what I mean by the rest of the stuff are the planer, the jointer, this bandsaw, that sander right there that you can't see, but it's my homemade belt sander, a strip sander, and disc sander, small disc sander, which I use quite a lot. The spindle sander is kind of in limbo for now because it's something I don't use a whole lot. I mean, I didn't use it a whole lot before I made the changes to it. And then I made the changes thinking it would become way more handy, and it did, but I still don't use it very much. So I'm saying to myself, you know, you got the drill press, okay? You can put sanding drums on the drill press, no problem. They don't oscillate up and down, but no big deal, okay? My table goes up and down. I can just stand there with the sanding drum on there with like a base for the sanding drum to fit part of the way down into and make the table go up and down electrically because my table does that. Right? It's motorized, goes up and down. So I could do that, you know, and that'd be fun to watch in a video. Or I could design something to do that electronically to make that table go up and down. What will be in the shed is just stuff to use for woodworking, okay? Only. Mainly that saw system that's on the wall, right? And that won't be a table saw, that won't be a miter saw. My miter saw station won't be out there. The miter saw that's in the miter saw station, I'll be using that in the saw system. That's the reason why I bought those batteries, because that saw system will be battery powered. The other tool that I'm using there is the table saw that uses that same battery. And I've got kind of an interesting configuration for that you'll see in the videos when I start making the videos covering that wall saw. I'm going to be making a series of videos, and I'm going to be putting those on my main channel as I go. I'll try to make one, well, there'll certainly be one this month because I expect that starting next week, I'll be able to put some serious time into working on the shed out there.